Welcome back to Street Writer.
It's your 10 minutes of writing motivation.
Inspiration and activation.
Take a swing at this.
These are the tips, tricks, and sleight of hand to power up your pencil and percolate your brain.
One thing that I have stolen and make good use of is from a terrific writer, Neil Gaiman.
Right.
So Neil Gaiman is well known for many things. I first got to know him personally a little bit, but also professionally when I was working in comic books. And he came up through many things, most famously probably Sandman, which was an epic tale of the dream space and the characters around that, mythology, themes he's continued with things like Good Omens and many other fantastic pieces of writing. He's got a triptych of things, which I always find is like a great way to start a piece of writing. And they're really simple. They're three basically writing starters, story starters. And they're so simple. They're based around just this. One is what if. The next one is if only. And then the third one is if this goes on.
Right.
And if you think about those, and not all together, but any one of those, in a situation starter, takes you anywhere you want to go.
Right.
What if something amazing, unforeseen, impossible, magical, never happened before happened?
Right.
If only. In the same way, if something changed, if only I had a better job, if only I was with the girl of my dreams, if only, a truck full of gold, went off the side of the road in front of me.
Right.
Where would that take you?
Right.
And if this goes on, if you're in a situation, your characters or your writing or whatever is stuck in a rut.
Right.
We're stuck in something terrible.
Right.
Like if we had some president who was just destroying a country or something like that. If this goes on, what would this mean for democracy, hypothetically speaking?
When you write, do you find that you've fallen into one of those categories, or has it happened kind of intuitively?
Well, I think this is what's great about when you find these crystallized bits. And we were talking about this last episode in terms of how do you find the writing tomes that tell you how to do things.
Right.
I think you do get to know these things intuitively, and if you look at your work, you see, oh, that was a what-if story.
Yes.
Oh, that was an if-only story. Oh, that was a if this goes on story.
Right.
But a lot of times, and what these are powerful for me,
Right.
is it's nice to have that stuff codified sometimes.
Yes.
Actually kind of there. Oh, yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
But it's nice to sort of see it kind of written down.
Yeah.
And as a reminder that that's part of the structural craft.
Yes.
Of what you need to work on.
Yeah, and I guess
I
think a lot of times as writers we end up there, but it takes time to get there. You know, so if you're able to pick up one of these things and just start with the what if instead of kind of backing your way into it, because in looking back at some of my works, I can definitely say that this job's a blast is a what if, and it's a what if about. What if corporate America started employing suicide bombers? It just seemed like you put two things together. If only becomes maybe something you'd like to happen and stuff. But to start with it can save time and angst.
Right. It's going way back, in episodes. It was sort of the same idea of those Storymatic cards, we played with.
Right.
They're idea starters, right? You still have to do the heavy lifting and the heavy writing and the heavy punching or whatever, to kind of get there. But it's a structural thing. Put that against any situation. Sit in a park, looking around. What if that guy who's walking across that park, his dog suddenly attacked that, that person next to him? If only that gorgeous person down the road, would come up and start talking to me. If I never left this park.
Right. If this continued.
If this continued, what would all my family and friends think of what happened to me? Right. Just in that alone.
Right. And then if you combine that and
we're not in a park, by the way.
No, we're not. No, we're in a laundry room. Going back to David Quinn, who was gracious enough to join us on an episode, when he talked about, just not wasting a lot of time with getting a lockdown on a verb or something like that, and just say use action verb or use character or something. Great tip. But I could also see that in that if you do stumble on something, what if that gorgeous woman, came up to me or something like that, it enables you it saves you time in that the what if gets you going down the path, and you don't want to be stumbling, or you don't want to have to be roadblocked from there. So if you can drive through with one of the things and have it in the forefront instead of having to, like in my case, I can go back and say, yeah, I guess that was a what if story, but to have it up front could save you a lot of time.
Sure. Got a tip to share? Send it to streetriders.podcast@gmail.com.
They beat us to the punch.
Admiring the craft or being jealous of it.
I like a writer named Christopher Moore because he hits on very dark, macabre areas.
Okay.
But he's got...
Sounds like my stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But his sense of humor is tremendous. So he can talk about the Grim Reapers and plagues and the Four Horsemen. It almost is like a Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett who wrote Good Omens.
Yes.
But it just brings a sense of humor to scary topics.
All right.
I love when you could take something that's just part of the story just to get it across, and to find that balance of adding these little side comments without slowing the story down and develop the character, but you would never think of putting them in.
Gotcha.
So I'm going to read a paragraph about this guy, Charlie, who, without getting too over, and his wife just died, and we find out that there are all these people who are soul catchers when someone's about to die, and it gets all involved. It's a really complex, cool story, right? But he gets still, each paragraph gives me a gem where he could have just mailed it in. He's noticing strange things happening around him with deaths and murders and stuff. So he says, Charlie hadn't really counted on killing a guy that morning. He had hoped to get some 20s from the register at the thrift store, check his balance, and maybe pick up some yellow mustard at the deli. Then in parens, Charlie was not a brown mustard kind of guy. Brown mustard was the condiment equivalent of skydiving. It was okay for race car drivers and serial killers, but for Charlie, a fine line of French's yellow was all the spice that life required. Out of parens. After the funeral, friends and relatives had left a mountain of cold cuts in Charlie's fridge, which was all he'd eaten for the past 2 weeks. But now he was down to ham, dark rye, and premixed Enfamil formula. He just had a kid. None of which was tolerable without yellow mustard. He'd secured the yellow squeeze bottle and felt safer now with it in his pocket. But when the bus hit the guy, mustard completely slipped Charlie's mind. I just love the fact that he can go in all kinds of directions in one paragraph.
Yeah.
He also describes this guy as a beta male, not an alpha male, so yellow mustard is perfect for him. And he also describes him, as I say, he's shook up about all these things, but he's also OCD.
Yeah.
All these things come across in one paragraph where he could have said Charlie liked yellow mustard.
Yeah.
So, the idea of not mailing it in and being in the middle of a complex story, but just this observation about yellow versus brown mustard, I love it.
Yeah.
And I love Christopher Moore, and the book was called A Dirty Job, a Novel. What writing is knocking you out? Tell us about it at anchor.fm/streetwriters/message.
Hit us with your best shot.
Time to get in the ring with us.
The Ring is back to being
Yes.
something a little bit different in terms of writing and storytelling, and it's moderating.
Right.
Moderating a panel. We've talked about this before. As a writer, as a professional, you get pulled into a lot of different situations. I got not pulled into, but I was part of building out a series of presentations for a local speakers group, and this was the Aspiring Speaker Series. So we
give a credit to Ferguson Library in Stanford.
Call out,
nice.
Shout out to them. And so we had an audience full of folks who wanted to become professional speakers, and we did a series of 3 talks around that.
Right.
And the third one was how to promote yourself.
Right.
So we had 3 people on this panel. We had yourself, right, from a video point of view.
Right.
We had Shannon Malkin Daniels. She's a business owner, an entrepreneur, and we were looking for her perspective from that.
Right.
And we had Greg Monaco from a personal brand point of view.
Yes.
So knowing that all these expert opinions were going to drive this idea of how do you promote yourself when you're
Right.
doing a professional talk, I just reached out to everybody.
Yeah.
I said, write your own questions.
There you go. And it worked.
Which worked.
Yes.
Now, that still meant I looked at those questions and I arranged those in certain ways and created what I hoped was like a story flow,
Right.
knowing I was going to go from Shannon to
Right.
then you
Right.
to Greg to
Yeah.
try to build things. And then it gets back to, I think, what we talked about before, which is you're right on the fly as well.
Right.
Because as you were saying one thing, I'm jotting down notes because it's either going to something I want to build with you,
Sure.
or you've mentioned something that may relate to the personal brand issue, and I can bring it back to Greg Monaco.
Yes.
So it's an interesting writing opportunity.
Right.
And this is, I think, the part of like being in the street again. It's not always what we expect.
Yes.
Right. It's not sitting down to write a play
Yeah.
or a comic
Right.
or a piece of business communication. Your skills as a writer, come into play in many, or can come into play in many different places.
Right.
So be aware of that.
Yeah.
Look for the opportunities, and look for the place where that craft and that skill
Right.
can be put into play, as long as you keep thinking about it as writing.
Yes.
And you think about it as storytelling.
Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, please, and connect with us at streetwriters.podcast@gmail.com.
Tell your friends to listen, please, and their friends too.
Take it to the streets.
And fight to write.